WORKWELL, as you can see from the shirt that I'm wearing, is a brand and a business that is very near and dear to our heart, because what we can see, I think, if we're paying attention, if any of us are paying attention, I think we all are, even though there's a lot to pay attention to these days. I think what we see is that people are struggling, that the world of work is complicated. It's always been complicated, but I think it's gotten a bit more complicated. And the signs that people are struggling are kind of everywhere. Signs of issues with anxiety and agitation, and challenges to mental health and happiness, if you can even apply that word in the work context. And I think you can, and I think we ought to. I think these are challenges that are real and relevant. And WORKWELL is an organization that wants to create, or help organizations to create, healthier and even happier places to work. To that end, we have been lucky enough, very fortunate, to collaborate with some people that are also equally committed to making a difference in that space. And when we meet people like that, we just want to find that common ground and collaborate. And today is no exception to that, because the individual that I'm about to introduce you to is someone who is truly committed to making a difference in the world of work. And we're feeling incredibly blessed. I'm fortunate to have her be a collaborator for us and to be delivering the webinar that you have registered for. And it's going to start in just a second. So I want to say a little bit more about her, and then she's going to just take the stage, and you guys are in for a treat. That's for sure what I can tell you now. Elaine Chung is the CEO of Beyond the Change, where she helps leaders accelerate team cohesion by connecting like young kids do, drawing from her diverse experience as a mom, a corporate leader in both startups and large companies, and a practitioner in what's called play neuroscience, team psychology, and organizational behavior. Elaine is on a mission to transform workplace interactions and bring more joy in how we connect and collaborate. Without further ado, the stage is yours, Elaine. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Adam, for the wonderful introduction. It's lovely to be here and share some insights on what toddlers can actually teach us around leadership and resilience. So as a mom of three, my first set of twins, or my first kids were actually a set of twins. And so I definitely have those great stories of being the toddler age, but I also have those stories. So my natural reaction when I hear, before I started doing this work, before any of this, that when I heard of toddlers, I might have thought a different set of words. So just for fun, I thought we would do a little bit of a waterfall, which is I'll ask a question and you just type it in the chat, but don't push enter until we do the final countdown, okay? All right, so why don't you share the first words that come to your mind when you think of toddlers? Go ahead and type that in. Don't push enter just yet. And we'll do, ready? 3, 2, 1. Kind of see what, yes. All right, we have uninhibited, happy. There's also creative. We've seen in the past crying, perhaps. And so thank you for including that. So when I speak of toddlers, you're probably wondering, wait, maybe not this kind, the crying one, or the whining one, or the super bossy with no filter one, or the super messy, chaotic ones. No, it's actually not that particular characteristic of toddler that I'm talking about, but it's more like this. So ever heard of or walked with a toddler before? Like, it takes forever. But that's because they find joy in the most mundane things that we might think is mundane, from a leaf to another leaf, to a twig, to a rock. They're able to find joy in elements of that. And have you ever watched a toddler on the playground too, or even up to a 5-year-old? They make friends like that. Like even with the stranger, and they're able to work together on the playground and have a good time. I countless times where it's been, oh, I don't know what kid my kid met on the playground, but they had a good time. I got to find where their parents are so we can set up another play date. So it's that magic to be able to find that connection right there. And yes, that toddler that also can really be imagining to new heights, to dream up to all these different elements that we may not even be able to imagine, because they really are at an amazing state of mind. Now, question for everybody here, just to ponder yourself, is think about, when was the last time you accessed some of that toddler state of mind? Now, if you're lucky, you might see a kid's mind in action, whether it be if you're an auntie or uncle or your own children. I've studied play and even saw a 3-year-old be able to have a grand time with a wet napkin at a restaurant. And so their ability at that time point to be able to truly think outside of the box, completely divergently, but effortlessly, well, it's not an effortless endeavor for us as we become adults. And that's because our brains are a little bit different. At a young child's development stage, there's 2 big areas that actually are starting to take shape, but haven't shaped up fully. But these 2 parts really make us adults. And these aren't actually formed fully until they're 25 years old. So you've got that prefrontal cortex, which is really about decision making. I mean, it's what makes it hard for little kids to clean up, even though you might have modeled it or even told them like a gazillion times. And it's the amygdala too also hasn't fully formed. And that's the one that is, they might be crying all of a sudden because you didn't give them the right spoon to eat with. Or like I had one time mine, she ate the last egg on her plate and that set her off. And so the amygdala there, as they get older, does shape and form. And when we're adults, our amygdala, yes, is helpful for any like outbursts of emotions we might be feeling. We're more adult, we're more mature, right? And then also our prefrontal cortex is helping us to make better decisions. So that mom also doesn't have to tell us a million times. But what happens unintentionally is that we start to perhaps ignore some emotions, just tough through it, right? Or on another standpoint, we can really be letting those shoulds and shouldn'ts, like for decision making. It's like, okay, I really shouldn't do that, or okay, I should do that. I should just do that because that's what it's been done and done before. And we stop trying new ways to think about things. We stop trying new processes and even building new relationship. And it's ultimately what really makes change, and change even in organizations, really hard for adults. Now, one question out here, we'll do a waterfall, if you will. Well, let's see. No, we'll just ask this question. All right. When you think about the changes in your team or organization, the changes that your team and organization have actually gone through, what qualities do you value the most to get a team moving forward again? And actually, let us do a wall. Yes, thank you. All right, trust. Those are good ones. Now, I was working with an organization who had gone through a substantial change, including a RIF. Yes, transparency. And, their team also had, direction from executive to bring in more AI technology, automate wherever they could. But kind of that first round of changes that happened, it threw them off. It was really hard for that team to get activated, to switch and then reactivate to this change. And this is actually not uncommon. In our working world today, here's what we're hearing. So when leaders are really asked about what are you really looking for in teams, they're really looking for individual qualities such as being proactive. So that employee that doesn't need to wait for instructions to the nth degree of detail, but can really execute on the project or idea at hand once it's agreed upon and they know it's aligned to the mission. Secondly, to be able to have that ability to pivot and pursue. So from the constant RTO changes, reorgs, goal changes that people are experiencing, leaders are really wanting resilient teams to be able to pivot. They can gather that information that they need to do to change that path and they can pursue it, all while bringing the organization along with that as well. And lastly, a big theme is pioneering innovation. And not just the technology and how we're using the technology, including AI, but innovation is also something more than just keeping up with those, but reimagining even how we work, how we problem solve, and continue to create value. So the more the team is able to embrace it with that mindset, the leaders consider that they're all actually able to be positioned to be much more able to thrive and succeed with the goals that they have in hand, but also to keep their employees engaged and activated within the work. Now, while this is what leaders actually want, and while they do need this, there's also something to pay attention to that's going on in the workplace. Now, I'll ask a question, Waterfall here as well. So who here has ever felt lonely at work, or maybe felt that even though they were connected with technology and all that and having meetings, that they weren't really connecting with each other? I'll do 3, 2, 1. Yes, okay. All right, so people have felt that. Well, and guess what? Not alone in this at all. And with what is going on now, we're actually seeing that even with all the technology to connect us from around the world, we have Zoom here, all these different things, that the engagement side is still at 30%. So for the rest of the employees out there, the 70%, everything's just, and we're still okay with it. Or I know we're trying to change it, but that still is a statistic that has remained consistent. Also, 1 in 5 employees actually feel lonely. And for some leaders that I've encountered before, it might be like, well, so what? But and thinking that it's not my problem, it's their problem. They'll have to kind of get out of it. But the fact is that it is, as a leader, our problem, because lonely employees are actually 5 times more likely to struggle with productivity. So given all these changes that are happening, and you're needing to have each team member pull a little bit more weight or think a little bit more differently, that is a lot more energy spend that they might be used to doing. And so doing that with that context of loneliness, that productivity will not be at the rate that you need it to be. And recently there was a statistic on, or actually the Cigna released a resilience study that indicated that 60% of people actually have low resilience, apologies. So how do we actually get leaders then that need the things that they need earlier on that we just talked about, but we're experiencing this in the workplace? Well, we actually need to learn from kids. Now, let's take a kids at how they look at things differently. And I'll caveat, so these kids that I'm about to show you were tasked with cleaning the patio. Okay, so we'll do a quick waterfall and ask you, what is it? Just type in one word that describes what you saw. The first thing that comes to mind when you saw that video there. Fun, bubbles, cooperation. Yes to all of that. And they were actually following their ABCs. Yes, making themselves useful. Yes, all but towards a goal. Thank you, Eileen. Yeah, so they were showcasing also their ABCs, which is they were showing their adaptability to all these different tools they use to clean, bravery to try new ways, and curiosity. And the special thing here to remember is that play isn't pointless. These kids actually still had a goal. Now, they cleaned the patio maybe in a different way than I might have or someone else might have, but they got the job done. And that's the one amazing thing too of kids is the first one, A. So they're adaptive, extremely adaptive. And anybody with a kid or have been around kids, children eat a lot, all right? So my kid here, she would eat snacks multiple times a day. And we would tend to have dinner as soon as they come home. Otherwise, it's just always snacks and snacks. And so my daughter here, she, after school, her hands were full and she's just trying to figure out where she wanted to put her snacks because she had grabbed a handful at the after school care and was starting to eat it. And she didn't know what to do with it because she had all her stuff too, but she wanted to eat it. So what she did, she adapted right on the spot. She turned around her hoodie and she used the hoodie part as her snack container. Now, her prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed, so she didn't have to get locked into that should and shouldn'ts that we as adults might. So like maybe it could have been like, well, you should have used a napkin, or maybe you shouldn't use your hoodie like that. None of that existed for her. And toddlers and young children can really access this quickly because of their brains. Now, take a guess. So there was a study that used a test that was for NASA astronauts and engineers. And they used that same test that they had given to those astronauts and engineers to kids. And the results identified genius classifications of like problem solving and creativity. In the chat, let's do another waterfall here. What % of adults you think that took this test were considered at a genius level? All right, 3, 2, 1. 4%, 1%, okay. So you all are very close in guessing this right. So George Land and Beth Jarman, they had a study where as adults, we scored 2%. So 2% of us in this group would have scored genius level. But you take a look at a 5-year-old, and they're at a whopping 98%. And in this study, George Land and Beth Jarman actually concluded that non-creative behavior is learned. We slow down our own adaptation with those shoulds and shouldn'ts, and they really get in our way. But remember, we were all kids once before, and we just have to tap back into that adaptive kid self. And with this waterfall, I want you to kind of think about adaptability. Now, and when you think about that adaptability for you and what it means at work, what are the first words that come to your mind and how you will kind of embrace this adaptability? Three, two, one. We're going to think about it too. Ah, yes, of course. So when you think about what adaptability means to you at work, what are the first words that come to mind? Naysayers, yep. Feeling stuck too. It can be a little bit hard to like fully adapt. Okay, ease, yep. Going with the flow, yes. And think quickly. Yeah, so adaptability within the workplace, some of it really is just changing within that mindset to try those things out. And, this is what it can look like in the workplace. It can look like treating information a little bit more like fuel, not friction. So you're absorbing it, analyzing it. You can adapt by listening, assessing, and turning on those insights into actions, like being free-flowing, as I think one of the audience members talked about, just being free within that thought, even within new information. So treating it as like, okay, we've got to change is very similar to what kids do. If you're like, I don't have a crayon, but I have something else for you to use, and they can adapt to that quickly. Secondly, what it could look like at work is actually embracing change positively. So that mindset shift really can make a difference. Kids don't categorize change necessarily. They're just kind of in that moment. So if you take on that mindset or that approach, that really does allow you to come at it with curiosity, to really unlock any type of solutions or exciting connections, perhaps, with ideas and both people. And another way you could actually adapt or bring in adaptability in the workplace is being able to set momentum proactively. And with that, it's more about like internally thinking about that adaptive vision of yourself. Like what, as clear as possible, like what could you do? What would you start doing? What would you think about? What are the shoulds and shouldn'ts that you want disappeared? So that you can actually think about proactively, okay, who are the people that I need to talk to? How do I actually develop this so that we can act more adaptively all the way through? And you can move forward with a lot of confidence with that. Now, I have 3 kids, so my third one, she had to undergo our parenting principles at that time with the third kid. So if she fell down, what we ended up doing is actually cheering and being like, okay, first make sure that there's no, no bleeding, no broken bones, of course. But at the end of the day, really cheering that she tried. And so one day we're in a public area. She is trying to walk down a huge hill, and she had a big old tumble. And I visually checked, she's okay. As a parent, there was a little bit of guilt because there's like everybody around us looking. And what we ended up doing, well, I just really clapped loudly and celebrated that she tried. And even though it was a big fall, she got up without tears and she went on. And kids do this so well. They really embrace that bravery because they are constantly playing at their edge. Now, okay, back in the chat. Let's do another waterfall for this one. This will be a little bit easier than that other one that we had to think a little bit. So what do you think? Let me pull up this number. What do you think that happens to the average 2-year-old 38 times a day? What happens 38 times a day? Interruption, yep. Yes. Okay, we've got it. Yes, they fall. There was even one stat that said that 1 to 2-year-olds fall 17 times an hour. Okay, so let's just take this 38 times a day. Imagine how you and I would feel as adults if we failed that many times a day. Like let's even just engage in the chat. How would you feel? So think of 38 times a day where you in essence failed. Be a little bit hard, right? Possibly devastating, yes. So that's the magic of kids, is to really be around celebrating the tries. So tap into that kid inside of you that doesn't maybe look at the number of failures that happened, but really around the bravery to try. Because when we actually show up with that bravery to try different ways of thinking or doing or even connecting with people we may not have, thank you, Howard, yes. But you're continuing. And so you can really create those positive changes that you need and really want at work, right? You got to have the bravery to try. And here are some ways it can look like at work, all right? Because we want to apply it into the workplace. One is speak up. Share your thoughts with confidence. Your voice really can spark insights and drive change, even if it's a different point of view. Those are all very important to wrap around a decision. Secondly, just introduce those new ideas and processes. Innovation really does start with that one bold suggestion, even if it's from one person, and trust those insights and just have that bravery to try and push that forward. And lastly, which I think is actually the easiest one to do, especially of how connected we are, is build connections beyond your circle. So it could be from, maybe it's beyond your working group, or maybe someone you might have seen their name on an email, but you never actually talked to them before. Reach out to them, because you never know what that actually might spark, and also the growth and the opportunity that you will experience on that new connection. So that gets our A's and our B's. Our next one is the C. Curiosity for clarity, okay? Like, kids are notoriously curious. And I will share an example of this.
Why? It's daytime. Not daytime, it's uptime. Yeah, it's uptime. You've got to brush your teeth. Why? Because you have morning breath. Why? Why what? No, kids can't have coffee. Why? Because coffee is for big people. Why? Because little kids can't drink it. It makes you too hyper. Why does it make me too hyper?
Okay, just a small sampling, and those that are parents too probably know this to the complete nth degree of this. But, she's just wanting actual clarity. Her own brain is actually mapping these causal links, and she's curious, but the genuine kind. And I'm not talking about the kind that, oh, look at that. Love the activity on the chat. And so, so I'll answer this. So why are they curious? Why? Because their brains are wired in a way that they have much more neural connections. So they're actually firing in all different directions. And as we age, we naturally have this pruning process. So it is the most driven path, or like the repeated path is the path that actually, the synaptic connections that are actually tighter and stronger. So that's why sometimes it's hard for us to actually get to like thinking of the why. But we're tapping into that right now. Yes. And so when we talk about that genuine kind of curiosity, I've seen in the workplace where it's not the kind that the question of curiosity that has a hidden agenda, or maybe someone's really asking it because they know the answer, really rooting it back to, it's really the genuine kind, like to try to understand, to go to the connections. And I'll link that this is a critical skill actually to build trust. So Stephen Covey, author of Speed of Trust, actually talks about seek first to understand. This level of genuine curiosity is that key to understand in that. And that's exactly what you're able to do when you approach it as a toddler would. Now, how could you actually tap into this as a kid? Curiosity is something that April, a speaker from last month's webinar, actually mentioned. And she mentioned that it helps you relate. And I'll take it a step further and say when you learn from toddlers, you can, how you're able to get to that level of relating to others in that group. Yes, April Bear. And how you're able to get to that level of relating to others in the group is to really lean into that question to gain real understanding. Not to the point of annoyance, but you're really just trying to understand, right? Clarity does come from curiosity. Many times I had actually like stopped myself before just because I thought, oh, somebody else already thought of it or asked. Or maybe I assumed that they had asked when in fact that they hadn't asked. So there's a lot of these assumptions that cause miscrossed wires that can cause confusion, but also if someone relied on it and then it didn't happen, then that's where you can start seeing where the trust part can actually break down. Secondly, on curiosity is like, you could try to see the bigger picture, learn how different roles and workflows actually connect to the larger goal within your organization. And I would say if you ask one person and they don't know, don't leave it cold. And so if you don't know, go back to number one and ask, and don't just let that knowledge trail go completely gone. Be like, I think her name was Zoe in that video, and just ask why. Lastly, you can actually seek feedback specifically to grow. So be proactive in asking for those inputs to sharpen your skills. So it could be like, hey, I tried this particular way. I changed my way of doing this. How did it help? Asking those questions, getting down to the curiosity of how your work, or even what you were brave enough to try, how that connected to the fuller side of things. Now, as a leader and as an employee, I've attended a lot of different conferences. And when I was at the conferences, it was full of excitement, and then went back to work. I was like, okay, I learned a lot. I have this fire of ideas coming out of those conferences, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to put that in play. But when I got back, it was actually a lot harder to have my mind so excited and playing at the conferences and then coming back to the office. And well, why? Why was it hard, right? So a few years back, I asked myself this question, and I surveyed 40 leaders about their thoughts on play at work. And all of them, they were like, I love this. This is great. Our team loves it. It's so good for the team. But then I asked a little bit more of why and how, and unpacked that it was always set for team offsites or a contained team building event. And well, play seems like it's on top of work. And as someone who's a play practitioner out there to spread how we can think about things differently, it was a little bit of like wah, wah to me. But they saw play and work as two different things. I was sad. But what I want to inspire you today is actually to think about them together. So you can actually carve out intentional spaces, still aligned to that goal, in order to embrace those ABCs and to have your team embrace the ABCs. That one video of the patio cleaning is just one example of how you can corral and put that container around it. And what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is these intentional spaces, because I think one of the themes too, as I did these interviews was, well, I can't have my team play all day. And that's only because they had assumed play was outside of work or on top of work. But if we actually think of play as integral, as part of the work, and all we have to do is build the container around it, and the container is this invitation to play. Now, this invitation to play concept is actually called the Reggio Emilia approach, and it was invented or based on the studies of the psychologist Loris Maluguzzi. And for kids, for those with kids too, you probably might recognize some of these type of things. It might look like the things that are on the left. It's like some loose material, some type of tool, and it's in some type of container. And the purpose is really to invite inquiry. Like it's a setting to invite inquiry. And for adults, it might look like an immersive experience. So an escape room, or Meow Wolf, or something like Sloomoo here, where it was a big pool of slime that you could actually play with. Now, what they all have in common, if you look at kind of the components, is there's some apparatus. I'll get a little closer look here. There's some apparatus, materials in a container in the traditional invitations to play. But how you can translate that then into the workplace is, well, the apparatus, like who are the people? Who are the people involved? So if I'm thinking about an invitation to play, is it everyone on the team? Am I going to first start with a project group? Is it even just the leadership team? We're going to just do a little pilot within us. And then secondly, resources. What's the time allotted? Is there financial resources to it? And even thinking about the mind space and allowing for that. And lastly, the context and format is really that container. So kind of when and where this invitation takes place to be able to explore, experiment, and connect. Because yes, this is actually the core of play. And this can look like running the beginning of a meeting a little bit differently, perhaps allotting time to do a new head, heart, body check-in that I've seen teams do as well. Or it can even be a whole project where the team is able to remove any ingrained should and shouldn'ts and are challenged to think differently. Those are the invitations to play that we're talking about here. And this is my invitation to you. So right here, right now, I want you to take a moment just to consider, what does your invitation look like? So the two, who's it to? Who's involved? Who are you thinking about? Is it a certain set of team members? Is it a whole development team? Secondly, what is it for? So what's that purpose? You still want a little bit of you want to craft that goal, align it to the work, because when you align that purpose, it just sticks a lot better. And you're able to form those consistent habits of creating those invitations so that you're inviting the team members to play in them too. And lastly, the container in time or type of meeting. So you could put the container in terms of like, okay, maybe it's just 15 minutes in this other meeting we're going to allot for this type of thinking or this type of inquiry. Or it can be an entire meeting that is set aside for that. Think about what that container really would mean for you. And when you are able to, have your teams integrate all of this, you'll be able to have what the leaders need, even with the environment going on, and you'll be able to have a team that is proactive, so they're not needing to wait for leaders to tell them and see, address the problems when it happens. They can be proactive about it. Secondly, they can easily pivot and pursue, so they can take on new things. Getting things like this scheduled. Yes, I will note, yes, please. Getting things scheduled on paper and committed to is very important, because it's a habit that we're trying to build over time. And you'll see your team be able to pioneer innovation. So breaking down those shoulds and shouldn'ts, like when you actually create those invitations to play, those containers in which the rules might be a little bit different than the typical organizational rule that you have, or the principles that your team may be used to, whether they be spoken or unspoken. This really allows them to break through that and think divergently. And you can create different ways of even creating different solutions, different ways of working and operating efficiently. And dare I say, actually, with a little bit more joy there. So leading like toddlers then could actually look more like this, right? Like a joyful team approach that is daring yet exciting. So a team that actually approaches work and work experiences with some awe and wonder. And also a team that celebrates those small and big moments of trying. And ultimately, to bring impact to your organization, you want to see that all sprinkled with a little more joy. So, in looking at these images, thinking about the ABCs that we talked about, I would love to take a moment here to do another waterfall and choose one word for this waterfall. Okay? How will you feel when your leadership can lead to more joyful teamwork, approaching work with awe and wonder, and ultimately bringing significant impact to your organization? I think of that one word, and then we'll do 3, 2, 1. If you could put that in there. Happy. Yeah, and I'll repeat the question again. I have a request to repeat the question again. Is choose one word how to reflect this. How will you feel when your leadership can actually lead to joyful teamwork, approaching work with awe and wonder, and ultimately bringing significant impact to your organization? Happy, inspired, fulfilled, energized. Yes, all of that, successful. So embrace those ABCs, and I encourage you to craft something that you can actually try today, even if it's starting a meeting a little bit differently than you typically would as you jump off to the next Zoom. Okay, and what else can we learn from kids? Well, went too fast there. What else can we learn from kids? Well, they actually hold ourselves accountable. So who here has actually said no to playing a kids or without guilt? Okay, sometimes we're saying no because we have to, we're so focused on our work, but there's always a little pain and guilt. All right, yeah. So it's very hard to say no. And these kids actually, regardless if you have them on your own or even just watch them on the playground, they hold you accountable to show you and how to get out of your comfort zone and play and really help you play at your edge. And as adults, we have to remember that that's actually how we grow. Kids are able to do that every day consistently. That 38 times a day, that's their edge growing all the time. And so I encourage all of us to get inspired by kids to get us out there on our edge. And it inspires that accountability to yourself and your team to also explore those edges. So get out there and go explore, experiment, and connect together with those ABCs of toddlers. And to also help you break down some of those shoulds and shouldn'ts that can slow us down in embracing the ABCs, I wanted to share and gift all the attendees that sign up today with a book that will be published in the spring. And this book is very close to my heart as I was identifying my own identities and realizing that there is an illusion of authenticity at work, where authenticity really isn't just about being you. But I wanted to encourage everybody to rethink authenticity to be much more about tapping into your best intentional self, even one that strengthens and uplifts those around you. This includes some research of the TEDx Red Rock event that I had on identities and impacts actually how we show up at work. So head to this link and sign up by the end of the day to receive your signed copy when it is published. And if you want to activate your team to integrate these ABCs or connect like kids do to bring out the best in each other, you can learn more on how to work with me at WORKWELL Labs. Thank you.
Way cool, way cool. So first of all, everybody, virtual round of applause, and I'm gonna do more than virtual because I have a microphone. So thank you for that, Elaine. I have a couple of questions, and I think there may be some questions from the audience. So we're gonna end this webinar by hook or crook in the next sort of 5 to 7 minutes anyway, to give people time, as we want to do, to give them time to break and get water and move on to the next thing that's going on in their day or their evening, et cetera. But I just want to say, first of all, the thing, so many things struck me, but the percentage, in looking at adaptability, sort of the percentage of genius in adults as relates to adaptability being 2%, I think my guess was 1%, so
Yes.
2%, right? And that in kids or toddlers, that genius zone of adaptability is 98%. That is such a stark contrast that I just don't think like that made an indelible mark for me, Elaine, and I'm going to remember it. So while I ask the team to be looking for questions that people may have, and if you've got questions, please put it in the chat and we can potentially pick up your question right now, in fact. I want to understand a little bit more about examples of what business play might look like. So I think for others, they may be thinking, this would be amazing. I would love to see this happen. What could it look like? And I can say in our organization, often we start meetings, and not every meeting, but important meetings and sometimes meetings of senior leaders and that kind of thing. And we'll start with gratitude. So it's not play so much as it is in creating a container and going around in a circle. It only takes a couple of minutes to simply express something we feel grateful for in the moment. And often that creates a total shift in the energy, especially people that are coming from some other meeting or some other thing, and now we're asking them to be fully present and fully committed and all that good stuff to the meeting we're having, and yet they're not really there, and that kind of thing. So that exercise, which is not so much play, but it's a kind of a different approach. Could you share some things like that with regard to business play?
Well, Adam, I would actually say if you look at play and define it as, are you able to explore together, experiment, and connect? That is play. Like that is how you're actually able to integrate play. I think for businesses and organizations, it's being conscious and intentional about it. And we have to be more so within that. And so taking on that, I've seen different versions of kind of doing meetings differently. One was even a team, and I think one part first before I start into the actual examples is having everybody co-create what it is and what it means, I think is really important. And because then you are able to include all the different perspectives, that also builds that connection as well. But different meeting starts. So I alluded to a little bit of this, but like a head, heart, body, like what is my head feeling today? What is my heart feeling today? What is my body feeling today? And having everybody share all those components of it is an example.
Yeah, I love that example. My own wife, when she would lead some of our organizational events, she would do something called I Feel, I Sense, which I won't lead in that. She'd be the better person to do that. But I just remember that being that kind of a process to get everybody just, again, divergent thinking and that kind of thing. So yeah, is there anything in the chat from my team? Just take a look in the chat and see if there's a question that's there, and you could even restate that question or move it to the top so we can see it.
Yes, there's a question. Oh,
great. Awesome.
There's a question from Brandy. Which A, B, or C is the hardest for leaders versus employees?
Yes. All right. So from the work that I've done and I've seen, the ABC that's actually hardest for leaders is the B, the bravery to try something new and something different. And part of it could be like their level and their kind of shoulds that they've already placed, so make them very fearful of trying that. And so that's where if you just start something small, like make it small, just a little bit different than what you might be used to doing to give you a little bit more confidence and bravery to take that next step. Don't let the kind of like, oh, I shouldn't do that, scare you right away. Like, okay, think back, like what would my 5-year-old self do? They probably might try a little bit, right? Just bring in a little bit of that courage to try. For employees, what I've noticed is a lot more challenge on the adaptability side because they are operating on their set of shoulds and shouldn'ts. And the more recent challenge that I've seen in multiple organizations that I've worked with have really been around that there are silent shoulds and shouldn'ts in these principles and the spoken ones. And the silent ones are actually the most damaging to team collaboration, proactive cohesion, and that seems to be a common kind of, I guess, like difference between what leaders find challenging of these ABCs and employees.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I'm going to remember that kids fall on average 38 times a day, but mostly because what you said is that they're on their growth edge. that they're challenging. How did you phrase that? You said they were challenging
They're exploring their edge. I think
they're
that's a
exploring their
huge
edge.
component that we've been missing when it comes to being comfortable. I remember having a high school teacher. She said she would always tell us, like, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so there's a little bit element of that, of exploring your edge to have growth. And kids are doing that consistently. And as we get to become adults, we get a little more afraid because we might have seen it one way or heard it done this way or heard someone's experiences that way. But if we're really feeling compelled or even curious about it, we owe it to try to be at our edge to grow.
Beautiful. And for those of you out there that are thinking, what could it look like to have Elaine come in and not just share content like this, share sort of a keynote, if you will, or lead a workshop, train, facilitate among your team or others within the organization. If you're curious about what that would look like and would like to find out more information about that, as Elaine said, you can go to workwelllabs.com/contact us and just drop your query in there and we'll get back to you and all that kind of thing. Elaine, I just want to say thank you so much for putting this content together for us, for, I think, opening up this question of where does play fit, and actually does play fit in our adult lives and even in this context in the workplace. And I think for sure, anybody that's been listening to this, watching you, there's no question that it does fit. So it's really about where. And how would you implement that? How could we, find that, create that space, and find the bravery and the brave champions to create that play, that opportunity for play as a measure, as a way to create healthier environments, happier environments, more resilient environments. As we said at the very beginning, at a time when those things are waning. And people are struggling, and we want to meet them where they are. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thank you, Elaine, for doing what you just did. Everybody give Elaine one more time, just in the chat. You can even just say, what's something that you're going to remember? What's one thing you're going to take away? What's one nice thing you want to say? Just even if it's just thank you. I see Jennifer Davis said thank you so much. So if there's any love that you want to share in the chat for Elaine in the next moment here before we close this out, please feel free to do so. And then just once again, everybody, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And everybody go play too. Find your way to play.
Right on. Yes. Okay. Ciao, everybody. Ciao for now.